AITA for calling my father's wife a creep? My 32 father, 60, has been married to Sasha, fake name 40s, for almost a decade. I was already an adult when they started seeing each other, so I never had much of a relationship with her. That said, Sasha was nice and thoughtful, though a bit annoying at times. And I never had any problems with her. I now have a husband, 34, and 2 kids, 9 and 4. Sasha is very fond of my children, especially my daughter. That became very suffocating pretty quickly, so we started setting some boundaries. She never overstepped them. In January, my father and Sasha decided to go on a trip to Disney World and invited us to join them. Decided to go to celebrate our son's 9th birthday. I quickly regretted coming along. Sasha spent the entire trip fussing over my daughter in ways that overstepped almost every boundary we'd set. Examples include, Sasha bought a mini ears tiara. She wanted me to buy my daughter an identical one so they could match. My daughter didn't like the tiara, so I bought her a Donald Duck hat instead. Sasha got her the tiara anyway and was upset that she didn't want to wear it. My father and Sasha went shopping in between parks. I told them not to buy my kids anything, as we still had shopping to do and didn't want to risk making our bags too heavy. Still, Sasha returned with 5 bags of clothing for my daughter and 2 for my son, saying she couldn't resist it. My daughter wanted a Belle costume to wear at the parks, as that's her favorite princess. Sasha tried to convince us to get her an Ariel costume instead, because that's her favorite. I explained that we never watched The Little Mermaid at home because my daughter is scared of Ursula. Sasha insisted on taking dozens of pictures with my daughter in front of the castle at Magic Kingdom. She also took some with my son, but not nearly as many. She tried to convince us to take our daughter to Bibbidi Bobbidi Boutique. We refused because the prices are crazy and we'd already bought her the Belle costume. She offered to pay, but we held our ground. I later found out Sasha tried to make a reservation anyway, but there was no availability. When we took our daughter to Slinky Dog Dash, her first roller coaster, Sasha tried to sit next to her. My daughter wanted to sit with me, so we switched. She tried to do the same thing in other attractions. At the Muppets Theater, she tried to get my daughter to sit in her lap. Sasha also tried to pick her up while we met some of the characters. There were more instances. The final straw for me, however, was the last park day of the trip. We were at Magic Kingdom. My husband suffered a minor injury and I had to take him to the first aid station. The kids wanted to go to the Peter Pan ride, so my dad and Sasha offered to take them in the meantime. However, according to my father, the line was too long. So instead, Sasha suggested the Little Mermaid ride, assuring my kids Ursula wasn't on it. Actually, there's a pretty big Ursula animatronic there. My daughter was still sobbing and hugging her brother when we reunited. When we flew back home, I told my father that we'd no longer take our children on trips with Sasha due to her behavior. He got extremely angry. He said his wife loved my kids, thought about what they'd like to do at every moment of the trip, and that we should be grateful to have her in our lives. I lost my temper at that. I told him Sasha was a fucking creep, and that they should be grateful I was still okay with them even seeing my children after her actions during the trip. We ended up having a huge fight after that. It's been weeks since we returned home, and my father is still angry at me and my husband. Sasha has texted me a few times. She says she's sorry if she made me uncomfortable, but that she loves my kids and hoped to use the trip to spend more time with them. To be honest, I don't think I'm the AH here, but I do think I might have overreacted. I believe there's a chance Sasha's actions were motivated by love and she truly did have good intentions. Update: AITA for calling my father's wife a creep? I think it's best for my family to distance itself from Sasha for the time being. And at the very least, my previous decision to avoid future trips with her based on the Disney trip is still the best course of action. Sasha's pushiness, tendency to override my and my husband's parenting, and blatant favoritism towards my daughter were much worse when the kids were younger. After my daughter's birth, she began to focus too much attention on her and almost none on my son. I gave more examples of that in the comments on my original post. That's the reason we set boundaries in the first place. Her fixation on my daughter also bothers me. When we had the boundary conversation with my father and Sasha, she told us that she'd always wondered what having a daughter would be like. She'd also defined herself as child-free before, so I was never certain what to think of that. Either way, that reassured me and my husband that we were doing the best for our kids. Those boundaries had never been overstepped. Then we went on the Disney trip, and most of them were completely ignored. Many of you pointed out that she might have gotten carried away, or that Disney is exciting and she wanted to make sure my kids had the best experience, etc. There are 2 things I'll say to that. The first is that whatever Sasha's reasons were, She still overstepped our boundaries. When we first set those, we told her that doing so would have consequences. Disney or not, I don't see a reason to make an exception. Secondly, she wasn't trying to ensure my kids had the best experience. She was pushing them to fulfill her fantasy of what their Disney trip should look like. She repeatedly ignored my children's wishes in favor of her own, despite them both being very clear about what they wanted and didn't want. Sasha also continually favored my daughter, including during my son's birthday, and fussed over her in ways that made her uncomfortable. And I still haven't forgiven the Little Mermaid thing. My daughter is a bit shy and takes a while to open up to most people, so knowing her trust was broken like that angers me in ways I can't describe. To put it in simpler terms, my children aren't props, and whoever treats them as such will, at the very least, be put in time out. I called my father and Sasha on Saturday. I apologized for calling Sasha a creep, but told them that we needed some time apart. They won't see my family until my younger sister's birthday in late April. If that goes well, they'll be invited to my daughter's 5th birthday party in May. After that, we'll slowly work on re-establishing contact. I also said that if they overstepped our boundaries again, the consequences would be more dire. My father didn't take it well. I don't care. Sasha sent me a text with more apologies, followed by a request to at least FaceTime my kids every now and then. I said no. And to those who said my controlling behavior ruined the trip, my kids had an amazing time at Disney World. They're both still talking about it. My daughter keeps asking us to put her pictures with the characters she met up on the wall, and my son says he had the best birthday ever. Update 2. AITA for calling my father's wife a creep? My father and Sasha wouldn't see my children until my younger sister's birthday. The party took place last weekend and we didn't attend. These 2 months of NC worked fine, but not great. My father respected my wishes, to my surprise, but Sasha kept trying to find ways to talk to my children. She'd call me under the guise of needing to ask me something, only to later say, "By the way, are the kids around? I want to say hi." Every time she tried that, I'd remind her of what I'd told her back in March. This must have happened almost a dozen times, which was enough for my husband and I to start debating on skipping the party. After speaking to our kids, we decided not to go. They both said they missed my father, but clearly didn't want to see Sasha. We thought about attending and just distancing them from her while there, but risking making our children uncomfortable wasn't worth it. My son even asked if we could see their aunt somewhere else, without Sasha around. My husband and I explained the situation to my sister. She was upset, but mostly because she hadn't seen the kids in a while. We all went to dinner at her favorite restaurant the day after her party. I also called my father and told him we wouldn't go to the birthday party. He reacted better than I expected, but we still had a short fight about it. He claimed that I had promised we'd let Sasha see the kids after 2 months, called me unfair, and said he was entitled to have a relationship with his grandchildren. I immediately denied that. Though I tried to sugarcoat it at first, I eventually gave him the truth. My kids don't want to see his wife, and I won't force them to. My father and I had a long talk. I told him how much Sasha's actions at the Disney trip upset my children, as well as how uncomfortable me and my husband felt. I admitted I don't trust his wife at all, and I don't think I ever truly will. He said that while he still thought I was overreacting, he understood I wanted to protect my kids. My dad also told me about how these 2 months of NC were for them. Apparently, Sasha started talking about my kids, mostly my daughter, a lot more than usual. She'd mentioned things and places she thought they would like. My father was aware of one of the times she called me, but thought it was a one-time thing. She wanted to give my daughter a gift at my sister's birthday party. He said he didn't know why. At one point, she told him she wanted to plan another family vacation with the kids, even though I told them they're not traveling with Sasha anymore. Learning all of that just made me more certain that I can't trust this woman around my children. For now, I intend to remain LC with my father and NC with Sasha. My daughter told me she wanted her grandpa at her birthday party a few weeks from now, so I told him that he was invited. But Sasha wasn't. He agreed. To be honest, I don't trust my father after all of this. I'm allowing him to come because that party will take place at my home, which is easier for me to control. If he tries to bring Sasha, they'll both be kicked out, and it will take a long time for me to consider letting him near my kids again. My father hasn't told me how his wife is reacting to this. My sister told me that during her party, Sasha asked her to tell me she wanted to talk. I'm not reaching out to her, nor do I plan to respond if she attempts to contact me. Both me and my husband have blocked her. My children are doing great. They still talk about how much fun they had at Disney. My daughter's been saving money, putting coins in her piggy bank for us to go back. On a completely different note, I'm pregnant again. This was completely unplanned. I always said I wanted 2 kids at most, and the third would have to be a huge accident. But my husband and I are ecstatic. I'm still in the first trimester, so not a lot of people know. We're brainstorming ways to tell our kids. Overall, I'm happy with my life right now, and as much as I wish this Sasha situation had never happened, I feel like a better parent after dealing with it. I have never been more confident in my abilities to protect my children than I am now. Update 3. AITA for calling my father's wife a creep? First of all, my father didn't bring Sasha to my daughter's birthday party back in May. I didn't really think he would. I'd made it very clear I wouldn't tolerate that. But I'd be lying if I said your comments didn't make me a little paranoid. Secondly, I've just entered my 3rd trimester, and the baby will be here in November. The kids are ecstatic. I'm having another girl, but my husband and I are not sharing the sex until she's born. This has nothing to do with our families. It's just something we've also done with our first 2. Everyone, including Sasha, knows I'm pregnant. We announced it a couple months ago. I had no problem with my father telling her, though he did ask if he could. I didn't hear much about her reaction, but according to my father, she was happy for me. My children still don't want to see Sasha, and I'm still not forcing them to. I've unblocked her and put her on mute instead, but she hasn't made any attempts to contact me. We've continued meeting my father without his wife, and I think it's been working out. My relationship with him isn't fantastic, but it's much better than it was earlier this year. Last week, I saw Sasha for the first time in months. My cousin threw a party at her place. My husband and I attended, as did my father and Sasha. I knew she'd be there, but since the kids weren't with us, son had a sleepover, daughter stayed with my mom, I didn't really have anything against seeing her. They arrived sometime after we did. My husband and I spoke with them for a few minutes, and it was less awkward than I expected. Sasha asked me about the baby's sex, and I told her we weren't telling anyone, which, again, is what we've always done. About 20 minutes later, my father told me they had to go. I thought it was weird that they were leaving so soon, but I didn't think much of it at the time. He called me a few days ago, and we spoke for a long time. My father is difficult to talk to, so the following is what I gathered from the conversation. He said they left early because Sasha was holding back tears after she saw me. She was sobbing by the time they got to the car. They later had a discussion about it, and Sasha admitted she wanted kids. She married my dad knowing he didn't, but hoped he would change his mind. Apparently, when my son was born, Sasha tried to drop "I want one" hints to my father. He didn't notice it, so she gave up. According to my father, Sasha told him she loved my kids equally, but my daughter was special because she always imagined herself as a girl mom. That's also the reason why she became such a suffocating presence when my daughter was a baby. When my husband and I started setting boundaries, Sasha realized she was overstepping and agreed to abide by them. To her credit, I think she did a mostly okay job back then, but the favoritism was still obvious enough that my son noticed it. The trip we took was a turning point because Sasha's dream of having a daughter included taking her to Disney World and having her do all the things she liked to do there when she was young. She told my father that having my daughter there was so exciting that she forgot everything I'd said about not overstepping. Sasha wanted a mother-daughter trip and tried to use my child for it. Sasha said she regretted her actions during the Disney trip, but only because she lost access to my children due to them. And seeing me at the party, all pregnant and pretty, my father's words, not sure she actually said that, was what drove her over the edge. I remember reading some comments theorizing that this was what was going on, but I still didn't really expect this. My father said he was telling me all this because his wife wasn't doing well, and he'd understand if I wanted to keep my kids away from her. Didn't expect that either. I don't know what the future of their relationship will be, and I don't think my father does either. All I know is that if Sasha still wants to have kids, it almost definitely will not be with my father. Before all this, I was pondering about my 3rd child's future in relation to Sasha. Now, I sincerely don't want her to be a part of my baby's life. This isn't a final decision, but I've been speaking to my husband about it, and he agrees with me. I don't think she's a bad person. I got some baby stealer comments on my previous update, but I don't think that's what's happening here either. But if the Disney trip proved anything to me, it's that Sasha is willing to be extremely selfish and disrespectful to get what she wants, even when my kids are involved. A couple months ago, my husband and I had a conversation with our son about the subject. He told us he dislikes Sasha for 2 reasons. She favors his sister, and she doesn't listen to them. Honestly, that's all I need to know. Looking back at my own childhood, I feel like I was never allowed to have boundaries. I was always expected to put my schedules and preferences aside. For others, it's important to me that my children don't go through that. If they don't want to see Sasha, they don't have to. Final update. AITA for calling my father's wife a creep? I'm happy to announce my daughter was born 2 weeks ago. She arrived a little earlier than expected, but she's perfect. My older kids are in love with their baby sister. And as much as I didn't plan to have a third child, I am truly glad I did. As I mentioned last time I posted, my husband and I didn't announce the sex in advance when our first 2 kids were born. This time, I decided to give my father a heads up. After I found out about the whole girl mom thing, I became worried about how Sasha would react to the news I was having another daughter. Telling my father ahead of her birth would give him more time to prepare. So about a month ago, my father told Sasha I was having another girl. As expected, she didn't take it well. A few days after I gave birth, my father told me that he and Sasha were separating. They're not sure about divorce, but he thinks that's where they're headed. Sasha started talking to my father about having children around the time I made my last post. According to him, they started fighting about it when she tried to convince him to get his vasectomy reversed. I didn't know he had one. My father said Sasha cried when he told her I'd have another daughter, and they decided to separate a few days later. I'm not very informed about the situation, but my father did state that the decision was mutual. About a week ago, Sasha texted me. It started with her congratulating me for my daughter's birth, then evolved into what seemed like a farewell letter to my children. Not much about them stood out to me, though "you'll never understand the love I feel for your children" was an interesting statement. She talked about how much it hurt to know she'd never meet my baby or watch my daughter become a big sister. Sasha told me I had tortured her by keeping my kids away, and it was that distance that made her accept she needed to be a mother. She deleted the text a few minutes after I finished reading it. I decided not to reply. I haven't been thinking much about the situation lately, but the more I do, the dumber I feel for not realizing Sasha wanted kids sooner. I remember she started talking about my father's future grandchildren long before I got pregnant with my son. Her behavior around my daughter, at least before the Disney trip, always felt weird to me. But I still never made the connection. I still don't dislike Sasha, but I think she brought this situation upon herself. As much as I recognize my father is far from innocent, he's always been very clear about not wanting more children. Sasha is 47 years old, and while I don't think I'd want to have kids at that age, I know people who have. If that's what she wants, then I wish her luck. We're also officially moving to Europe in 2025. The work-related news I mentioned in my previous update were really great. My husband and I had been hoping for an opportunity like this for a while. We're helping the kids make arrangements to maintain contact with their friends. Luckily, my daughter's best friend is my goddaughter. My 28F best friend, 29M, is barely talking to me after we shared an intimate moment. I've known my friend since middle school. We were neighbors and went to the same schools, and we've always been super close. Until very recently, there were absolutely no romantic feelings or attraction between us. He's always just been my friend. A few months ago, we had a falling out. He was dating this crazy girl who was treating him like shit. She was super controlling over him. We pretty much never saw each other after they started dating. He called me one night to complain about her not giving him any space, and I told him exactly what I thought about her. I did not like her. She was rude, and he could definitely have been doing better. When I told him all of that, he blew up at me. He said I was meddling in his relationship and that I didn't know her. He called me some pretty harsh words and told me I was jealous. I had no feelings for him at the time other than seeing him as my best friend. I wasn't jealous. I just missed my friend and thought he should be treated better. After that call, we didn't talk much at all for months until 2 weeks ago. He stopped hanging around our friend group when I was there, and he didn't return my messages. Well, they broke up, and while he didn't message me right away, he eventually started sending me stuff on Instagram. Just memes and reels. Nothing much, and we didn't talk about his breakup. That is until last week when he called me and apologized for just falling off with me. He told me I was right about her controlling him, and he said that she didn't want him talking to me because she thought I wanted him. We made up, and I met him at his place to hang out for the first time in months. When we were hanging out, we were getting really physically close in a way that we had never done before, and we ended up hooking up. I never thought that would happen with him. I think maybe not seeing him for a while made me miss him to the point that new feelings developed. Like an hour after, he told me that we shouldn't have hooked up, that I was like a sister to him, and that he wasn't attracted to me at all. We got into an argument, and I ended up leaving without staying the night. Now we're back to not really talking at all. He'll send a funny thing he saw on IG every other day, but he won't discuss anything with me at all. I don't know what to do. He's been my best friend forever, and now we've had 2 back-to-back falling outs. I don't know how I feel about him, but I don't want to lose him from my life. Do I just give this time? Do I call him and insist that we talk about what happened? This is really tearing me apart. Update. My 28F best friend, 29M is barely talking to me after we shared an intimate moment. So, he texted me Friday night and asked to be able to take me out to make up for all that had happened. I agreed, but I told him that we were really going to need to talk about the past few months, and especially about the night we slept together. He took me out to a really nice place, and he immediately apologized for a lot. He said he was sorry for ditching me for months to just message me, sleep with me, and then ditch me again. He apologized for being so cold after taking my virginity and not checking in to make sure I was okay. He also said that he was sorry for using me for years, that he had been keeping me around for emotional support while not really returning to me with the same support. He confessed that the last relationship ended because they were both cheating on each other, and that he knew he was a serial cheater. He asked how I was doing since we hooked up, and it was hard for me to answer. I can admit now that I wanted it for a long time. I remember wishing he would ask me to dances when we were kids. Our friends had teased me about it, but I always shrugged it off. I told him that I was hurt that the guy I've known for most of my life took my virginity and then told me that I wasn't attractive. Having that happen was one of the most hurtful things I've ever experienced, and I felt betrayed and used by my best friend. He again apologized and said that he's been attracted to me for a long time and that he's wanted us to be more for years. He said that I deserved better than that. He also said that he still had a great time with me that night and that it was better than he had always thought it would be. Then he asked if I wanted to try being more than friends, and I told him that I wanted to, but I didn't know if I would be a good idea. In this conversation, he told me that he was a serial cheater, and I kept thinking about all the comments on here telling me not to just trust his sweet words, that his actions speak louder. I asked why he thought he would treat me any better than the many other women he's been with and treated terribly, especially after treating me terribly too. That made me cry a bit, and he said that I mattered more than the other ones, that what we had was more special, and that his family, who I said in comments have been like my surrogate family, always thought we would get together. I have never really seen him cry before. He's always been guarded and wanting to seem tough. It was new to see him so vulnerable. I told him that if we were to start dating, I'd want to take a few steps back and start slow. I'm not going to just jump back in bed with him. He needs to prove to me that he can do better. The rest of the date went well. He took me to my favorite dessert place before dropping me off at my place. He didn't try to convince me to let him come inside for any more, but he gave me a very sweet kiss. I think I'm going to try to make this work. I love him. He's been my favorite person for years. Am I in the wrong for telling my ex-husband that our kids are justified in feeling like they don't have a father? I'm 33 and have 2 kids, 12 and 8. I divorced their dad when I discovered he was cheating on me with a mom from our younger son's school group. Despite that betrayal, I agreed to shared custody because I wanted my kids to grow up with their father in their lives. However, since the divorce, he's only been around when he's picking them up for visits. He often goes out with his stepchildren, but rarely includes our kids, claiming those outings are spur of the moment and can't always include them. Eventually, I stopped pushing, but I've always thought it was unfair that he keeps his distance from our children's lives. Recently, I decided to upgrade my older son's computer, and he asked if we could give his old one to his cousin, my brother's son. My brother has been a huge support for my kids. He's always available to take them to their school events when I can't, and often takes them out to the park or for trips when I'm busy. My ex, on the other hand, is rarely available for them. Anytime I ask him to help with an activity, he has an excuse. He's out of town or swamped with work. Ironically, though, whenever his stepkids need something, he's there. Once, he even argued with the stepkid's father at a school event, insisting he had the right to be there. When my ex found out I gave the computer to my nephew, he got upset. He complained that if I had money to spare on a gift like that, I should have forgiven 2 months of child support he'd missed, since his finances were tight with a new baby. He added that if I could give away a computer, I should have gifted it to either his kids or his stepkids, who share just 1 computer among the 3 of them. I told him my finances were none of his business, and that I owed nothing to his stepchildren. Then his wife jumped into the conversation, accusing me of spoiling my son by giving him a new computer and of being petty for letting my son bring it to their house, claiming it was just to show off in front of his step-siblings. I told her she had no right to speak to me that way or question my decisions. I added that I allow my kids to see their father so they can grow up with him in their lives, not so she can interfere with how I parent. My ex was offended, but I told him this whole situation could have been avoided if his wife hadn't inserted herself where she doesn't belong. After that, things seemed to calm down until last week. I went to pick up the kids, and my ex was visibly upset. He explained that he'd tried reading a bedtime story to our youngest. At home, he still likes to be read to before bed, usually by me, his brother, or my brother, and when none of us are around, he listens to audiobooks. Apparently, my ex wanted to make an effort to connect, so he offered to read to him, but our son turned him down, saying he didn't need him for that because he could do it himself. My ex stayed to listen as he searched for a story for 8-year-olds without a dad on his tablet, and it hit him hard. The next day, my ex offered to take our older son to basketball practice, but he replied that he'd be going with his dad. He quickly corrected himself and said uncle. That made my ex even angrier. And when I came to pick up the kids, he confronted me about it. I told him that if our kids feel like they don't have a father, he has only himself to blame. He tried to shift the blame onto me, saying I was the one pushing him away from his role. I told him it's up to him to show up for his kids, not something I can do for him. I reminded him he was the one who broke our family, and he's chosen to be more involved with his stepkids than with his own children. I told him not to kid himself. The kids are growing up, and they're starting to see the reality of who he is as a father. If he keeps this up, he can't expect much from them in the future. After that exchange, his mom called me. While she's always been polite to me, I felt the need to say that I would have appreciated this same concern from her when she supported her son's affair, knowing her grandchildren were losing their father in the process. She hung up, and we haven't spoken since. My brother advised me that I had every right to express how I feel, but he suggested that maybe this discussion shouldn't have happened in front of the kids. Later, my ex texted me saying that if I weren't so difficult, he'd spend more time with them. I told him his duty as a father doesn't depend on whether I'm easy or not, and he knows I've never prevented him from seeing the kids. The truth is, when he has to choose, he prefers outings with his stepkids over his own children, and that's something only he can change. Update. Am I in the wrong for telling my ex-husband that our kids are justified in feeling like they don't have a father? My ex sent me messages saying he wanted to resolve things, stop arguing, and talk to me. I agreed. He came to my house, and we didn't beat around the bush, we went straight to the point. He asked me if I really thought he was a bad father. I replied that, looking back now, I never would have chosen him to be the father of my children. He said it wasn't easy for him, and I answered that it wasn't easy for me either because I take on both his role and mine. He told me he couldn't leave his stepchildren without a father because he had already broken their family, and I replied that he had left his own children without a father. He started crying and told me it was my fault, saying that when the infidelity happened, I refused to forgive him or go to couples therapy. I kept telling him things I'll admit they weren't kind, but none of them were lies. He asked me if, given his current state, I didn't feel sorry for him, and I said no. He told me he didn't think I could be so cruel, and I replied that when I changed jobs, pulled my kids out of school 2 months before the end of the term, moved houses, and watched him disappoint our kids over and over again, any empathy I might have felt turned into apathy. He left after that. His mother called me and said she knew what I'd told her son, that he hadn't stopped crying, and that she didn't understand how I could carry so much hatred to hurt her son like that. She said I should just get over it. I answered, with all due respect, what I said wasn't out of hatred, but out of truth. If your son is crying, it's because he's finally facing the consequences of his actions. Maybe instead of worrying about how he feels now, you should have taught him to take responsibility and treat people with respect. She said I didn't know what it was like to feel a mother's love and see a child suffer, and I replied that I did understand because I have 2 children who cry over a living father. 2 children who see their dad being a father to other kids when he doesn't have time to be their father. She said he was sorry, and I told her not to put words in his mouth and to stop calling me about anything related to her son. I hung up. I wanted to cry so badly, but I'm a damned mother, and I don't have time for that. I want my kids to feel safe, loved, and strong enough not to need anyone, not even me, to be themselves. Last Thursday, I took my kids to their cousin's birthday party, hosted by my ex-sister-in-law. I still have a good relationship with her. She was the one who told me about the infidelity and that her mother was already encouraging it. My ex showed up alone and irritated. My kids kept their distance from him. They kissed his hand, but then ignored him completely. My ex-mother-in-law told the kids they should show more respect to their father, and my eldest replied that he doesn't show respect for me since he and his partner talk badly about me. I scolded my son, not for what he said, but for how he addressed his grandmother. I told him it was wrong to eavesdrop on private conversations and repeat them. Then I asked him to gather his things because we were leaving. My ex-mother-in-law asked me not to leave, saying the kids were having fun and we could resolve this as adults. She asked my ex what he had said, and he claimed not to remember. I told her I didn't care, and she said we should be good parents. I replied that to be good parents, you need to be good people first. My ex was getting agitated. My ex-mother-in-law asked why we couldn't have a civilized co-parenting relationship. I told her everything I've mentioned here about his free will to see the kids and how the second custody agreement isn't working since he only sees them some weekends. My ex didn't want to discuss it, saying he had too many kids at home. My ex-mother-in-law told him the only kids who should feel comfortable are his, and the comfort of the others should be provided by their biological father. My ex wanted to end the conversation because his mother was scolding him for being a careless father. He also said it was my fault, I asked him to clarify how it was my fault. You can see the kids whenever you want. What more do you want? He started yelling, claiming I was only being petty because I didn't really need the money since I earned more than him and had fewer kids to feed. I told him I wouldn't continue the conversation and that I'd show him what being uncivilized looks like by filing for the overdue child support payments. His mother asked what I meant by overdue payments. I explained that he was 3 months behind. She was furious, slapped him, and demanded to know what he had done with the money for his children. He answered, I couldn't let JR miss out on attending the same school as my son. I didn't want him to feel inferior. Update. Am I in the wrong for telling my ex-husband that our kids are justified in feeling like they don't have a father? My ex-mother-in-law said she couldn't believe it, and they started arguing. I left. Yet for context, my youngest son attends a private school, and my ex pays for his stepson to attend the same school. Yesterday, my ex-mother-in-law came over and said she would pay the overdue fees. She brought the money in cash. I knew my ex would be furious. Here's some context. My ex-mother-in-law doesn't work, doesn't own anything herself, and lives with my ex-sister-in-law. However, she does have significant savings from her inheritance. If she pays the tuition, my ex knows there won't be much left for him when she passes, even though she's still healthy. He's been asking her for years to invest some of that money in his business ideas, but she's always refused. My ex's retaliation was not picking up the kids this weekend. Yesterday, my ex-sister-in-law called me. She doesn't know all the details yet, but apparently, my ex's 15-year-old stepson punched him in the mouth. She said she'll let me know exactly what happened once she finds out. And before anyone asks, the new custody agreement will likely take a year to finalize. The court says the overdue payments are the priority and the rest can wait. We have more urgent cases. WIBTA to divorce my wife after she said she wanted to send our son to a conversion camp? My wife, 44F, and I, 45M, have been married for 14 years. We have 2 kids, a 16-year-old son, let's call him Noah, and a 12-year-old daughter. We've had our fair share of disagreements over the years, OFC, but things have generally been smooth between us. Now for the context, Noah came out as gay about a year ago. It was a surprise, and as hard as it was to accept, I love my kids more than anything and just want their happiness. My wife visibly didn't take it well, though. She was upset and seemed to go through a grieving period where she didn't really talk about it. I tried to support Noah in every way I could, telling him that I loved him no matter what, etc. My wife, though, I could tell she wasn't on the same page. She would say things like, "This is just a phase," or "He needs help," but I brushed it off as her needing time. Fast forward to last week, and we were having a conversation about Noah's future. Out of nowhere, my wife casually mentions that she's been looking into conversion therapy camps and thinks it might be the right solution. She said that Noah isn't truly gay, that he just hasn't been shown the right path, and that this could fix him. My blood ran cold. I was in shock. I immediately told her I didn't agree, and that this was not something I could support. Duh. She got upset and said I was enabling Noah's confusion, and that if I really cared about him, I would help him get better. WTF is wrong with her. She was persistent, and no matter how much I tried to explain that conversion therapy is harmful, like I know those kids get abused, raped, and often end up either traumatized or killing themselves, and that I would never send our son to something like that, she wouldn't back down. If I'm being 100% honest, I don't even think I love her anymore. The fact she could be so heartless disgusts me. I know being gay is not easy, and people like her just make it even harder. I'm considering staying, only for our daughter's sake, but would it be okay if it means hurting my son? It feels like a betrayal to Noah. I just don't think I can keep living with someone who thinks this is okay. Update. WIBTA to divorce my wife after she said she wanted to send our son to a conversion camp. I went to pick Noah at his school, and as many of you suggested, we had a long discussion. I basically told him his mom and I may be getting a divorce because she wants to send him to a conversion camp, but I can't accept that. I've talked with her many times, and I told him I'll probably go through with it. He looked really hurt. My heart broke all over again, but was very understanding and thanked me for standing up for him. I pulled him into a tight hug and told him I'll always love him no matter what and that nothing's his fault. At that moment, he started crying because he was so glad at least I was on his side. And I'm very pissed, so sorry if I don't make sense, but apparently his mom had been pressuring him for months. She planned dates with girls to try and fix him, and he had to lie by saying he was going at a friend's instead. She was saying he needs help, and as much as she loves him, he needs to get his condition cured. etc. I feel so bad because I've been so oblivious to all that, and I've failed to protect him for all that time. How do you make your 16-year-old son go through that? So when we got home yesterday, I can't lie, I was furious and confronted her right there and then. At first, she was trying to explain she was doing it for him, but her speech quickly turned to slurs, and it was clear she was just ashamed of having a gay son. In the end, I told her I went to see an attorney, and that learning all that just confirmed that I want a divorce. She got really angry. Calling me a delusional disgrace, we argued a lot, and at some point Noah tried to separate us, but my wife punched him multiple times. She was saying disgusting things like he is a dirty fact and that it's all his fault we're getting divorced because his filth corrupted me. My daughter, who was prob in her room, came to see what all that commotion was about and was rightfully horrified and quickly called 911 when I told her to. Long story short, the cops got there and took her away. She was very reluctant to go because she was not in the wrong and they needed to let her go. I explained everything to my daughter, and she doesn't want anything to do with her mom anymore. I'm in the hospital because my ex-wife broke my rib while I was restraining her. I should have probably went as soon as the cops took her, but IDC. My son was crying, with a black eye and split lip. They are checking for any concussion. And obviously the only thing I cared about was to comfort him because I can't even imagine what it can feel like being beaten by your mom for being gay. I'm planning to file for full custody OFC, and my kids don't want to see her ever again anyway. Given all the charges she's facing, I hope she won't stand a chance against me. I just sent a mail to my attorney and I hope the procedures will be fast. I've also thought of getting CPS involved, but I'm not sure they will really help. Like, I cannot understand how you can grow so resentful of your own kid because of something they can't control. Even I had pretty strong opinions about it, but as a father, it is my role to unconditionally love my kids. And so I learnt about the topic and changed my way of seeing the world for him. It took some time grasping it, but I never doubted one sec the love I have for my child. I thought it was the same for my wife. Visibly not. Update 2 WIBTA to divorce my wife after she said she wanted to send our son to a conversion camp? First of all, I was able to get an emergency custody order. I'm very, very relieved because many of you warned me about how people can have their kids forcefully taken by those conversion camps, and I'm relieved that she can't do that anymore. I'm still overly anxious and only leave my son alone when he's at school. I've instructed all the teachers to make sure no one but me approaches him. Thank God my boss has been understanding on the matter. I've been granted the exclusive use of our house as well, so I've changed the locks and installed security cameras. Many friends and family members, from my side of course, have been visiting often, to give us both emotional support and safety. Many of you also advised me to document every injury that my son and I sustained. Fortunately, my son didn't suffer a concussion, so I took plenty of pictures and gave them to my lawyer, and she has also taken my son's, and my daughter's testimony. Given all the charges my wife is facing, child abuse both physically and emotionally, neglect, endangerment, assault and battery, hate crime and domestic violence. Yeah, it doesn't look very good for her. Our lawyer is confident that I will 100% be granted full custody. She also said that it's likely her attorney will recommend that she gives up her parental rights, given the overwhelming evidence against her. Also, it's very likely that my son and I, possibly even my daughter if she asks for it, will be granted a restraining order against her. My lawyer has told me CPS involvement will only strengthen my case, as they are thoroughly investigating everything. While we're still waiting to get the court date, I am feeling highly confident and relieved for the first time since all that shit happened. I've gathered tons of overwhelming evidence against the toxin, thanks to that person who came up with that name. I'll keep everyone updated, and thank you again for all the advice and support my kids and I have received. I honestly don't know how I could have gotten through this without all of you. Y'all just saved a family. Be proud. AITA for snooping and losing trust in my girlfriend after what I found? My girlfriend, 26F, and I, 30M, have been together for 7 years. Up until about 6 months ago, the relationship was great. Few argument, lots of love. But we had one issue that grew into a massive battle, which was my wishes to move to my home country for economic and happiness reasons. To do this, we would have to be married. She wanted to stay to be closer to her family, which I understand. After many discussions, we almost reached a breakup point where she said she wasn't sure she wanted to be with me anymore because I was unhappy in our current country. She became very cold very quickly, and I became suspicious that it was not the country that was an issue, but maybe someone else had entered her life. I asked her point blank, but she denied it. Things became so weird between us, and so my suspicions grew. To be transparent, I did not believe her and began habitually snooping for the first time in our 7-year relationship. And I'm not proud of this, but at least once a day for approximately 1 month. As I say, I am not proud of this, but we do not usually go on each other's phones, and like I have stated, This was the very first time in our entire 7-year relationship I have once gone digging. Sadly, I found some pretty gut-wrenching things, at least in my opinion. Detailed below. 1. A voice note to her best friend explaining how she felt like she was recently on a date with her boss, and she felt guilty. 2. Multiple chats with ex-partners, mostly benign, but was unable to have a good read due to limited time. 3. Found she was habitually liking her ex's pictures on Insta. Not ones of family or landscapes. There were straight-up selfies, etc. After finding the voice note to her friend, I decided to confront her about it and said she should come home from work early, but I lied saying a friend of mine saw them. But it was actually found through snooping. On her way home, she deleted the voice note and offered me her phone after the voice note was deleted. I declined access to her phone at this point. I don't know why. She explained it was a drink with her boss, whom she knew I was suspicious of, as her train home from work was late. Not a date. Plausible, but still weird. It was described like a date. I had previously expressed some concern about this boss as she took a very late-night ride with him after a work evening once, which I didn't feel comfortable with. He is of similar age to me. Eventually, I decided to come clean about snooping and told her I found that she was liking pics of exes and had messages between them. However, she refuted and explained there were no messages. It turns out she had deleted the messages entirely after she suspected I may want to go on her phone snoop. I told her that I knew they existed before, but she had deleted them and she caved, saying, "I didn't want you to misinterpret them." I couldn't read all of those messages, so my trust took a big hit here. On the topic of liking ex's pictures, she said there was nothing in it, but the one that I really was hurt by was a like on this ex's selfie, which was posted on my birthday. In her defense, I did ask her to immediately remove him from social media, which she did, but did so begrudgingly, I must admit. Lastly, I asked to see her Snapchat FYES section. She agreed. At first, my heart was warmed, as this appeared to be where she stored my intimate images. However, as I scrolled down, she had a selfie of her and her ex-BF in there, taken 1 year into my relationship with her. This was during a Christmas party. He worked at the same company at the time. The selfie was quite close. It looked like they were having a great time. I immediately went on the offensive, and she looked like a deer in the headlights, explaining it was just a selfie and nothing happened that night. I queried, "Why would you hide it then?" She said she knew it would upset me. So I said, "If you knew it would upset me, why take the picture in the first place?" She had no answer. IMO. She knew this pic was out of line, hence why she hid it. Her friends and family believe me to be taking this way out of proportion, and that actually she didn't break my trust, but I broke her trust by snooping. My girlfriend and her friend's family believe me to be in the wrong, and she has done absolutely nothing wrong, even the selfie with her ex. I'm sharing this now because I don't know really if I'm in the wrong for thinking that these incidents were wrong. I felt like my feelings were invalid and that perhaps some couples are actually okay with these types of actions. Our situation at the moment is good though, and we do seem to be moving forward, but she is still unable to believe that I have lost trust in her. Major and final update. A lot has happened in these last 6 months, and it's a weird feeling to be typing this out, but I'm in such a better place mentally and actually have found solace in the last 2 months. Shortly after posting, my now ex-girlfriend asked for some time apart and indicated that I needed to see a psychologist for the trust issues that I had as a result of what I'd found. Although some of the comments indicated that I was NTA for what had been found, I actually agreed with her and came to a conclusion that she was loyal and that I needed to seek help, which is what I did. My ex-GF and I agreed to be exclusive during a 2 to 3 week break, and I went ahead and received professional help. I met with my ex-GF once a week to discuss things, and they were exceptionally emotional conversations, as you might expect after a 7-year relationship. Each time we met, she indicated she wanted to break up and kept saying she wanted to focus on herself, etc. But I kept bringing her back and agreeing to give me more time to get the help I needed. However, on the 3rd week of the break, I went to my dad's house so that she may return to our home so that she could have space from her parents. She had been staying at her parents' house, and they had been pressuring her to remain in the relationship, to try and give her peace from that. I decided to get out of our home so she could be alone there. On the first night at my dad's house, I randomly received multiple voice notes from a somewhat mutual friend, more friend of hers than mine. They were voice notes of a conversation between my ex-GF and her friend. There was a lot of content here, but to make things concise and relevant, I will just include a few snippets. The thought of XSXX, me, sleeping with another girl at his dad's house doesn't bother me, but the thought of XXXX, her boss, getting off with someone makes me jealous. I get jealous when I see XXXX, her boss, laughing with any other girl in the office. I can break up with XXX, me, for 6 months and sleep with XXX, my boss, and then get back with XXXX, me. I would include more, but it would risk the anonymous tag. Basically, you probably get the gist. There were also multiple dates that she had with her boss that were mentioned that took place during our exclusive break. I returned back to our home the next day and ended the relationship. Sadly, I could not mention our mutually exclusive friend's name, as I was asked not to. And to be fair, she did me a huge favor and thought I deserved to know the truth, so I did not share it. My ex-GF came up with a story of me planting bugs and cameras in the house and plotted a smear campaign. Thankfully, it didn't work. Fundamentally, here's the takeaways. Although she never physically cheated, it was going in that direction, and I had lost her loyalty. I will never know why. My gut feeling was right all along, and I say to anyone in a similar situation, your gut instinct is very powerful. Snooping is wrong on any level, but I do not regret it, which I understand seems a little hypocritical, but without snooping, I would never have found out the truth. It's of course better to snoop when you are given a reason to, and I now feel like I did. End the relationship the moment you have lost your trust in the other person, and there are no strings attached. It would have saved me a lot of time, money, and emotional energy. I found out the actual reason my mom lost custody of me, and I don't know if I can ever look at her again. I was removed from my mother's care by DCFS when I was 11 years old due to allegations of SA posed against my stepfather. He was convicted of those crimes, but took a plea deal which meant he'd be out by the time I was 13. And from what I can remember, I don't even know that he served those 2 full years anyway. I was his primary victim. I don't remember how old I was when it started, but the earliest he admitted to was when I was 8. I don't know if my mom knew before DCFS got involved or if she found out afterwards. But now, I don't think it would have mattered to her if she was aware. After being put into temporary custody of the state while the legal issues were sorted out, eventually I was placed with a relative and her husband, who later adopted me when it was clear my mother wouldn't be getting me back. My adoptive parents put me in therapy, got me the help I needed, did everything they could to make me feel safe again. Something they never prevented me from was speaking to my mother. I was always able to call or text her, and she was always allowed to come visit me, but I could never go and see her. I didn't really question it as a kid. I assumed it was some stipulation the courts made. I believed growing up that the reason my mom hadn't gotten me back was because of neglect, I guess. I assumed that the court thought it was partly her fault that I had been left unattended with that man so often, or that it took someone else noticing I was physically injured for something to be done about it. My adoptive parents never challenged these assumptions I had, and they always told me that they would never stop me from having a relationship with my mom so long as that's what I wanted. Once I turned 18, my mom and I started talking more frequently, but we didn't see each other in person often. I never really thought much of it at first, but as the years went by, I started questioning the circumstances of my removal and subsequent adoption. I was confused as to why a woman with no prior issues with the law would have had her child taken from her in such a cut and dry way. I decided to ask my adoptive parents about it, and they very gently informed me that my mother was told that in order for her to regain custody of me, her husband, my abuser, would be required to leave the home and could not under any circumstances come near me. Not only because he was an offender, but because I was the victim. My mother evidently could not meet these conditions, and so I was adopted by my relatives. When I worked up the courage to ask my mom if it was true, she didn't deny it. She told me she loved him, that he was a good man who made a mistake. They said that she could have her daughter or she could stay with her husband, and so she chose him. She picked him over me. I don't even know what to do with the things I'm feeling now. I feel sick just thinking about it. She's my mother, and she knew what he did. He was convicted of sexually abusing her 11-year-old child, and she refused to leave him. For the past 12 years, she has willingly slept in a bed next to the man that assaulted her daughter. She has stayed married to the man who hurt me. My adoptive parents said they were advised by the therapist to let me figure it out in my own time, as my mother, despite picking that man over me, never made any move to have me near him again. She just wasn't willing to make him leave so that I could be with her. Evidently, the therapist thought it would be more detrimental in the long run to keep me from communicating with my mother entirely. None of that makes me feel better. The past 2 days have felt like a nightmare. I don't understand how she could stay with him. I don't understand why she chose a monster over her child. I'm trying to understand why my adoptive parents didn't tell me, but to be honest, I don't really understand their reasoning either. My mom has been texting me, but I haven't answered. I can't even think about her without feeling nauseous or so angry I want to cry or both. My adoptive parents keep checking in on me, but I've only answered the phone for them because I don't want them to drive here out of concern. I really don't even know what to do anymore. I'm not necessarily mad at my parents. I'm just overwhelmed with the reality of this situation. I don't know how I feel, but I know I need time to feel it. I am still in therapy, which is related to the abuse I experienced, so I do have a professional to rely on for guidance if I need it. And I don't think I'll ever be able to speak to my mother again. I can't get past this to forgive her or understand her reasoning, and I'm not sure I will ever want to try. Update. I found out the actual reason my mom lost custody of me, and I don't know if I can ever look at her again. I had a therapy session earlier in the week, so I was able to bring this revelation up to my therapist, and we're going to work on ways to help me through processing this. That's obviously something that's going to take time, but I'm sure eventually I'll find a way to live with it, I guess. Right now, I still don't know how to unpack any of the feelings I have about this. I do understand why my adoptive parents went about it the way they did. In the moment, being given that information was just a lot to comprehend, deal with, and I felt betrayed, not necessarily by them, but I think I did put some of those feelings onto them. That wasn't really fair, and I did try to apologize, but they aren't upset with me for it, and they felt I didn't have anything to be sorry for. They know firsthand how difficult this is for me, and they told me they were already expecting the reaction I had. My adoptive mom said that if she had been in my shoes, she would have been upset too, even if that feeling wasn't entirely directed at the right people. I did speak to them about how I felt, and I asked if they could tell me a little more about why they decided to handle it the way they did. They said that when they got custody of me and saw all the ways the trauma from my earlier childhood manifested, they wanted to do everything to make sure I would be able to grow up as cared for and well-adjusted as possible. When the therapist encouraged them not to tell me the truth or challenge my belief that I'd been removed from my mom because of neglect, they followed that advice. The doctors and my parents thought it best for me to understand my mother's choice on my own. They said that I had already been failed by so many adults in my life that were supposed to protect me, and that they didn't want to add to that list. My adoptive dad also mentioned wanting me to be able to enjoy at least part of my childhood without something like that revelation hanging over my head, which, looking back at all of it, I really appreciate. I don't remember much of my childhood up until I was put into my adoptive parents' custody, and what I can remember isn't great. But the childhood they gave me made up for that in spades. I know the choices my adoptive parents made for me were made with my best interest in mind. I love them, and I know everything they did was out of love for me too. I feel like people misinterpreted what I was saying in my last post about my feelings towards them, so I just wanted to clarify that part of it. Regarding my mother, I essentially told her that I wasn't interested in speaking again, given everything I know now. I don't know how she took it because I've since blocked her number. My parents have agreed to reiterate that message for me if she contacts them, but I don't think she will. I'm never reaching out to her again. I can't do it. I think part of me is always going to be wondering why she did the things she did, but based on all the answers she's given to my questions so far, I'm not sure her honesty would be very helpful to me in the long run. AITA not supporting GF's sister. I have been with my girlfriend 27F for 5 years. She loves her sister a ton, which is a good thing, as I believe supporting and helping your siblings as long as it doesn't ruin your own life. You will understand why I say this later on. We just put down a mortgage on a house in the suburbs of a large city. I, 28 million, work in tech as a software developer with a master's degree in computer science. I make quite a lot of money, so money issues never arose. GF doesn't work and does chores, cooking in the house. Both agreed on this. I was going to propose to GF next year, but a problem arose about 2 years ago. For the last 2 years, probably longer, GF has been sending money to her younger sister, let's call her Emily. Emily got pregnant at 20 years old. Emily works as a waitress. The father is bouncing from job to job. Emily says that he is very lazy. He will disappear hours at a time without telling Emily where he's going or what he's doing. Emily has asked my girlfriend on several occasions for money. My girlfriend, being the nice and sweet person she is, says yes all the time. It started off as paying for diapers, no problem. Then baby clothes, which also no problem. Then daycare, which I just brushed off. I talked with GF saying we can't always pay for everything and that helping out for a couple things is okay, but not everything. GF reassured me and said that it would be stopping soon once they get their feet picked up, which is fine. One day I hire a financial planner. The next day I get an email saying my account has sent approximately $50,000 for the last 10 months and have around 20,000 sitting in my account. I talk with my GF and she apologizes and says she knew that I wouldn't want to keep sending her sister money and how she just cares of her sister. We've been paying for everything. Insurance, rent, car payment, daycare, clothing for all three, dinners, dates, going out expenses. It is partly my fault because I never check my bank account. GF shows me text messages between her and Emily saying she needs the money. I then noticed a pattern where Emily would say, "Hey, can you send me dollars? I don't have money for AITAH." And of course, GF says yes. I brush it off, and GF says she won't send any more. The next day, GF sends her $1,000 because they needed car repairs. I talk with GF, and we get into an argument where she says she will always help her sister no matter what. I understand to an extent. We argue trying to understand each other's POV. As stated before, we had $20,000, and now we're down to $19,000, and then how about the next time? And the next time after that, on top of our own expenses. GF then decided that she needs some time alone and that she will be at her mother's for the time being. Now I'm all alone in the house. I thought I would live with the girl of my dreams. I never thought that my situation would blow up to thousands of people. I'll try to answer some questions at best. I make around $150,000 a year as a lead software developer. As someone who has no kids, dogs, or any major responsibility besides myself and a GF, I never checked my account. She comes from a cultural family where family is everything and money is just paper. She texted me earlier saying how it should always be family first and that money didn't mean anything without family and how we should help close family like siblings in their time of need. At this point, I told her I needed time to myself and told her not to come back until I'm ready to talk. I apologize if my sentences aren't making sense as whiskey is my only friend RN. I also forgot to mention we started dating before all this money came into play, so I trusted her. I'm more sad by the betrayal than the money. Money will come back, but time will never come back. 5 whole years. My proposal plan, my life plan, my future kids I dreamt about with her just gone. All the things we've said to each other. All the late-night wine-drunk times we spent. All the dates, all the flowers I gave her. I really tried with all my power to be the best man she can have. I would have trusted her with my life, and what do I get back? $50,000 gone. She's now my ex. We met at a local coffee shop, and I told her that things wouldn't work out for us, and she went absolutely ballistic. She caused a scene begging me to not end it. It did hurt me to see her like this, but after a couple weeks to give it some thought, I would not want a wife who is a liar and one I couldn't trust financially. I left a $100 bill on the table and left, but she followed me down to my car. She begged and told me she wouldn't send any more money to her sister and how she would do anything for us to be together. It was hard, but I stayed strong. She picked up her belongings the other day, and I almost had to call the cops because she wouldn't leave. She first tried everything from sexual favors, begging, crying. Then it turned to
AITA for switching out my daughter's school lunches behind my wife's back. My wife, Sarah, 36, and I, 35, have an 11-year-old daughter named Lily. Lily had begun attending 6th grade in September, but this problem only recently became a major issue. Sarah is Indian and makes great dishes that the whole family enjoys, and tends to pack these lunches for Lily as well. She typically packs Lily a rice with dal in a container or something similar, which she had no issues with in elementary school. However, recently Lily came sobbing to her mom and I about the lunches she took. The kids at school had been making fun of her food, which absolutely made my heart break. I had struggled with the same thing at her age. I come from a Chinese family and would always take homemade food to school too. And when I asked her if she wanted us to report the problem, she begged us not to so she wouldn't be called a snitch or worse. When Sarah heard this, she simply contacted the principal, which I didn't want to resort to at first, and left the issue, telling Lily she wouldn't be buying school lunch and to just ignore the other kids. The same problem occurred every day. Lily would be coming home feeling extremely upset, and there were even times Sarah would yell at Lily for not even touching her school lunch. We both had talks with Lily about her culture and how she should be proud, have contacted the schools, but the school is ignorant of the issue. They simply had a talk with the parents and ended it there, and Lily isn't budging. I don't want her to starve because so many days she doesn't even eat her lunch. I know how brutal middle schoolers can be, and I didn't want Lily to feel insecure or upset even if it meant making her take other lunches. But Sarah refuses to make other lunches. I began to make other lunches for Lily, like sandwiches or sometimes mac and cheese, so she'd feel more comfortable eating it in school in front of her classmates as a final resort when nothing else worked. I would take Lily's lunch for myself at work and pack her own lunch early in the morning, which she finished and seemed happier when coming home daily after. However, this only worked for about 2 weeks until Sarah found out and was infuriated. She said I was denying Lily her culture and she needed to learn to stop being insulted by other kids, telling me I'm raising Lily to get whatever she wants. Is Sarah right? AITA? A lot of people agreed with me. Some told me I should let Lily pick her lunch. I showed the post to Sarah and it took about an hour or so, but we both sat down and talked white side Lily on where she wants to go from here, and she said she liked the lunches I packed her, etc. However, we also figured out this bullying had been going on for longer than just 2 to 3 weeks. So Sarah agreed to let Lily take whatever lunch she wanted on the condition that she'd eat homemade food, Chinese or Indian, for dinner breakfast still, and we all agreed, so Sarah got her part in it. As for the school, since the principal hardly did anything, we reached out to the school board superintendent and are still waiting for a response. I think this had solved the issue. We managed to resolve everything. The superintendent and school board were actually incredibly helpful and got back to us within 2 days to schedule a meeting about this. I don't want to go too much into detail, but there were 2 specific girls who played a big role in the bullying. I believe one of them got detention for some time and another got suspended because she'd done this before. Their parents were also super apologetic and supportive of Lily and didn't try to get in the way of the consequences, which really was nice. As for Lily, she is doing much better and is definitely more content and happier when she comes home from school.
AITA for not paying for my girlfriend's haircut? My girlfriend, 32, and I, 38, have been together for 2 years. I lost my job about 3 months into our relationship. During this time, she really came through for me and helped out a lot. I did not have a car, so she would help me deliver orders on DoorDash and Grubhub so I could pay my bills. She also covered the difference out of her pocket if I was running short. To say I'm grateful to her is an understatement. I finally found a new job 2 months ago. I'm saving up for a car, so she's been letting me borrow hers. She accrued some debt while I was out of a job, and I have repaid about half of that. However, now I'm worried that she's starting to only want me for my money. We got into an argument over the weekend because she called to ask me if she could borrow some money to get a haircut. Apparently, she is running short due to an expected home repair cost, but already paid the hairdresser a deposit that she would have to forfeit if she rescheduled it. I had a long day at work and was exhausted, both mentally and physically. So when I noticed that my phone was ringing, I was really excited to see her name.